Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to this week's critique session with my good friend Alister Benn. I hope you enjoy these videos. If this is your first time here, be sure to go and check out some of the videos from the past where we take viewers' images and we give them a bit of a critique. And the whole purpose of the critique is to give some insight into perhaps something that we might have done something a little differently, or perhaps something that we really like about the photograph. And for our viewers, the whole point is perhaps you'll pick up some tips, or perhaps a new way of thinking, or perhaps think about a new subject to photograph, or whatever. There's a whole slew of things that you can gain from these critiques. They're quite relaxed. We're definitely not saying that we're right and everybody else is wrong. If you strongly feel that we've mishandled an image and given it a bad critique, be sure to leave a comment down below. All right, without further delay, let's get stuck right into this week's image. This is the type of thing that I love to photograph when I'm on the coast, and often when the light is not terribly great for the ground landscape, it's really nice to get those reflections and the patterns within the sand. So I think Barb is onto something here. I'm not sure if it quite works for me in that the composition to my eye tends to draw me out of the frame. All of the interest for me is this top right corner here. This section here, because it doesn't have quite as many patterns in it and it's not quite as bright, it gets a little bit lost. We don't really give much attention to this section here, so it just kind of draws you away. So one of the things that I was perhaps thinking of trying was, now this is going to be a really quick and dirty edit here, so please bear with me. I just grabbed a brush and I'm just going to quickly brush in this section here, maybe up here a little bit. And I'm just going to bring up the whites of that section like that. And we're just going to get another one. Maybe this time, this time try and concentrate more on this section. So what I'm trying to do here is just level it out a little bit so that we're not just looking at this section. Because of the brightness, we're looking at this area as well. I do find that these little yellow things, they do form quite a nice pattern, but again, they're over on the top here. So if there's any way that Barb can subdue those a little bit so that they are not bringing so much attention to themselves. I was going to suggest that overall, adding contrast really brings out those patterns even more, because I'm assuming that was the attraction to this scene. It was these wonderful patterns here. So if we add contrast, that certainly brings more texture in there. But again, we're starting to lose it in here because this doesn't have as much texture. So we might actually have to brighten it up just a little bit more. This would probably work better using luminosity masks in Lightroom, Photoshop. But of course, not everybody has Photoshop or wants to use Photoshop. So Lightroom will have to do in this case. Maybe something like that. I think you get the idea. And then the yellow bits, well, that's personal preference. They don't really seem that important to me. What is important to me is the pattern. So perhaps I guess the ones that I find a little distracting are the ones on the edge of the frame here, especially this little one here and these sections here. But great idea, and I think, as I said, Barb is well on her way on to finding something other than the grand landscape, and this is always what I look for when the light isn't really working my way, or even if the light is good. You can get some great reflected light on these sand patterns.
So lovely to see a photograph here from Barb. I'm guessing this may actually be from the most recent Oregon workshop that she was just on, I think out of Oregon. So I guess that she may have actually been with Adam when this photograph was taken. As people know from my critique style, the way I like to critique images is to consider how the content sits in the frame, the consequences of the creative choices, and the distribution of feel. I think that's where my particular interest lies. So I do very much like these abstracted images. You know, once the tide has gone out, it tends to leave all these beautiful little pools in the sand, and we've got the sort of directionality of the flow. So we know that the ocean is off to our right hand side here down the slope, and these curious little orange things that are left over are asking some nice questions that I kind of like. The general feel of this image is that if we look at our midtones, most of the peak of this image is in the shadows, so it's on the darker side. We have very few highlights, and what highlights there are typically in these brighter yellow spots, which they're either foam that the sun is hitting or it's bits of seaweed or something like that. But whatever it is, it's kind of nice. I kind of like it. But with the midtones peaking actually on the edge of the shadows there, the overall feel of this is quite dark. It feels quite heavy. If it were mine, and this is where my preference is going to come in, or where my opinion is going to come in, I would be looking to perhaps rationalize some of the things that I think may actually be slightly distracting in the frame, that take away from some of the content, and also the sort of incongruity that sometimes reality can get lost a little bit. The first thing I'm going to point out is just a couple of these little marks in the water there. I think I would definitely be inclined to remove that, to tidy up that edge a little bit. I would also be inclined to, and this is just heavy-handed because I'm just staying in Lightroom, to remove, and that's made a bit of a mess, but you get the idea, removing that heaviness, because once we return it, that's not too bad, I guess, but that definitely I would be removing, this little spot. The other thing that I feel, I don't mind this sort of out of focus. You know, we've got nice detail in the foreground and we've got a nice diffusion into the background. To my mind, there's a slight greenish tone in here that I may be inclined to somewhat neutralize. Now we can, if there's green in an image, we can pull the slider slightly towards the magenta. We may try to use a little bit more cool as well to try and play around with that. But the other thing is, I feel that the energy just gets a little lost on that top frame there, and rather than trying to pull down the sort of end, you know, like a termination, I think there's enough energy and strength coming through this middle area, these strong diagonals, that I don't think we need to worry too much about the feeling at the top of the frame not being able to support itself. I do wonder how necessary that top area of the frame is. It suddenly gets very diffused, and I love this section so much, but that top edge, it just feels almost like all the contrast and the energy comes out of the frame. So I actually find the top a little unnecessary. It's almost as if I'd prefer the image just to be contained more like a 4x5 horizontal, you know, to sort of finish before that heavily diffused top. And I just wonder if that isn't the whole picture without it diffusing out the top of the frame too much. We do cross the line into personal opinion, I think, but that top edge just feels too diffused and oddly toned. But the bottom 80% I really do like, and therefore I would question whether it might actually be better to drop it into a 4x5 horizontal and just get rid of that top section. But on the whole, Barb, I really like this. I really love the tonal contrast with the cool to the warm, these little highlights of yellowy gold sparkled across. Couple of little distractions that I would consider moving, and that top edge I don't believe is helping the frame too much.